Welcome to Refreshed, a show where we highlight the wonderful people, work, and ideas on the internet. I'm your host, Anna, and today I have with me an incredible reporter and overall human being, Palmer Haasch. Palmer, I am so excited for you to be here today. This is like fantastic. I miss you so much, but this is like just as great because then I get to show everyone else how wonderful you are. For the chat, in case you're not aware, Palmer and I both worked at Polygon together. And Palmer, where are you now? Can you give us a little lowdown on your path since then?
Yeah, I'll give the Reader's Digest. So I'm currently a digital culture reporter at Insider, where I predominantly cover fandom, memes, stan Twitter, general online communities, along with as needed things like influencers, online discourse, misinformation, very rarely, but sometimes. But predominantly, I do a lot of work in fandom spaces, and I have a history reporting mostly on entertainment. I did some anime, some cartoons, general stuff as an intern at Polygon with Anna, and then also through work at sites like Thrillist and a little bit at The Verge. But yeah, so that's generally my background. But right now, lots of fandom. Lots of K-pop at the moment.
Yeah. So, okay, Palmer, before we go on, I know we brought you on here to talk about K-pop stans, but frogs. Please give me the lowdown. Tell us about your most recent hit, like breaking news feature, and also then what it led to.
Yeah, I'm a very serious reporter. I recently wrote a feature about frog content online and essentially how, while frogs do have such a storied meme history online, from things like Pepe to Dat Boy to Kermit to Soup Time, things like that. Now there's been actually a really recent surge in like organic frog content online, where people are interacting with things about like real frogs being cute, being wacky, wearing hats, watching blogs where people take care of them as pets. There's a lot of fun art and things like that. So a lot of frog content today, what I discovered, skews super wholesome. And I actually reached out to a few social media platforms about if they had seen any increases in content, and actually found that on Reddit, the frog subreddit had doubled, I think, in like traffic from March to May 2020 compared to the previous year. And then on Tumblr, there were like hundreds of percentage increases in things like original posts and reblogs on tags like frogcore, frogblur, and things like that. So it actually turns out that the frog explosion wasn't just on my feed, because I just started seeing like a weird amount of frog videos and stuff. But it actually like really was a thing. And so that was generally what the report was about. And what it concluded was that frogs, like, people can like them for really deep reasons, and frogs are super cool, but like ultimately it doesn't have to be that deep. Frogs are really just neat. It doesn't really have to go that much farther than that. And so I recently spoke about it on All Things Considered on a segment that aired yesterday, which was fun. So love frogs.
I was like, okay, Palmer's made it. She's gotten frog discourse onto public radio on the national level. Like, pack up and leave. Even though I want to see where you go, I think that's it. Like, you've made it. That's fantastic. I love it. Okay.
Thank you.
So unfortunately, you're not here to talk about frogs. It seems like the chat likes it. Like, we could talk about frogs all day.
We can talk about frogs.
Maybe, another time we can talk about frogs exclusively. Well, actually, before we go on, I don't know if it's your report, but when someone points something out to you and then you start seeing it everywhere, I was kind of like going through TikTok and sort of noticing, is like, wow, there is a lot of frog content here. Like, even in Animal Crossing, like MinnMax community will know Froggy Chair. Huge.
Chair. I would die for Froggy Chair. I would lay down my life.
Yeah. I mean, we're still working on getting Froggy Chair. I'm kind of disappointed we got the swim update before Froggy Chair, but the Froggy Chair cult will never die.
Right.
Okay, so transitioning now into our main topic. I was trying to think of a way to connect frogs to K-pop. It's not coming to me, but for the MinnMax community, I just want to say that I see you've reported on a lot of things. You've reported on TikTok. You've reported on anime. You've reported on anime in TikTok. But like a lot of where I see you is like you are my K-pop queen. And so before we go on and start, talking about get into the why we're talking about K-pop this week of all weeks, could you give us like a rundown of what K-pop is for folks that might not be familiar?
Yeah, so K-pop is a really broad term that signifies like certain types of music, and it's really an industry in South Korea, in entertainment and stuff like that. And so some people would call it a genre. I don't think that's necessarily super correct in the sense that it's not like one genre of music. There's so many different musical influences that influence K-pop, but essentially K-pop is a highly like multimedia focused, I guess, art form. Yeah, you can say, where so much of it is the music, but so much of it is also based on aesthetics and music videos and promotion and things like that. And so it's different from what you see in American pop music, I think, just because of like, at a base level, considering groups that have 6 or more members, which isn't really, or even 12 or 13 or like 20 plus, that you don't necessarily see in a lot of other music industries or like in Western music, especially. But now the biggest signifiers of like K-pop and the biggest groups that are really bringing about like what we would call the Hallyu wave are groups like BTS, which I feel like you really have to live under a rock to not know at this point, who have really like come into Western consciousness and American consciousness over, I would say, probably like the past 3 years now, really extensively. But generally Korean pop music is the easiest way to describe it, but the term does like implicate so much more than just the music. It's also the production and like the idol aspect of it as well. So
yeah, I feel like fandom plays a large role in the K-pop culture specifically. And on that note, then Tom was like, asks what do stan and simp mean? Can you give us a quick rundown of that and how it relates to the K-pop community?
Yeah, so stan is like the most relevant term. So stan essentially means to like be a really dedicated fan nowadays. So if I say like, oh, I'm a BTS stan, or more correct terminology would be I'm an ARMY. We can get into later the fandom names and stuff like that. But standing is essentially just like really following an artist or something in a dedicated way. And it originally actually comes from an Eminem song, Stan, which a lot of people like to bring that up as like a problematic origin because the song is about somebody like an Eminem fan essentially like going to really extreme lengths to try and get in touch with him, and among other things. So people like to say, why are you using a term like that to describe your attachment to your artist? But right now it's become such a commonplace term that it's really just like regular language to talk about fandom these days, particularly in the ways it's concentrated on like Twitter and stuff. Simp, we could probably both talk about that. I forget what exactly, it's an acronym, right? I know what it means. But
I have looked it up on Urban Dictionary multiple times. I only know that word like in context, like I would simp for X anime character. And so I mean, it's like similar to stan. I think it's more like sexually explicit.
It deals more so, simping is more so like, there's a certain like degradation element, I think, inherent in the term. Like you're knowingly like quote unquote degrading yourself like for simping. And it started out like gendered, like a man would simp for a woman, go to all lengths and things like that as a meme. But now I've seen it used in like, way more gender neutral context.
Okay, so Palmer, what would you say is like your favorite K-pop specific term then? Like, do you have one that you like to use or one that sort of surprised you?
That's so hard. I'm trying every like specific language thing I think of is pretty basic, but I guess one that I find funny to use. Sorry, my air conditioner just went on. I hope it's not too loud.
No, that's okay.
It's really noisy. One of my favorite terms I think is bias, which is a really, really common K-pop term. So in K-pop, your bias is essentially like the member in a group that you are drawn to the most. It's just your favorite member. But I think it's really funny because it's used pretty specifically in K-pop stan communities that like if I'm like, okay, who's your bias in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or who's your bias in One Direction? Like I think that's really, really funny. Or like I remember talking about like Big Time Rush had a comeback recently, and just because that term hasn't really been applied to like Western boy bands, and I was like, oh, like Logan biases, how are we feeling? Because the actor got like really hot or something. But yeah, so like I think that's a fun term. One that's really common within the fandom, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think it really speaks to this way that K-pop has sort of bred and created like its own entire culture, right? So much so that like it is developing this language and vernacular around it that is so potent that is now being, you know, used with like non-K-pop groups. And so like we have this sort of like, it just speaks to the strength of this. So that's sort of like our brief intro to K-pop, right? So now the question is like, why are we talking about K-pop today? Palmer, would you like to, I have an idea, but you have actually reported on it. So if you would like to sort of give us a quick rundown of what's going on. And
yeah, so
oh no, and just for the chat, like if you have any questions at any point, feel free to jump in, and we'll get through them as well.
Yeah, I will also check on chat a little.
Oh, no worries. I'll watch chat. You just worry about
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So recently, K-pop fandom in particular has come into mainstream American media discourse because of a series of viral actions that have been attributed to K-pop stans online, as well as TikTok teens, to an extent that it's almost become a sort of meme now, or trope, where essentially I'll go back to the beginning. So it essentially started with a series of viral events where K-pop stans theoretically, allegedly, took down a Dallas police reporting app. So this was one of the first incidents where Dallas Police Department tweeted out for asking for people to submit videos and photos of protesters to one of their apps. And someone on K-pop stan Twitter floated the idea of spamming the app with fan cams, which are at a most basic level focused videos of like idols performing. Submitting fan cams to that app as a means of just totally overloading all of the input in a way that would make it virtually impossible to actually find videos of protesters and therefore identify them. So the app did temporarily go down. I actually did ask the police department for comment, and they wouldn't tell me if it was because of the fan cams. Yeah. But there was a period where it went down. So that was one of the early incidents. I think probably the most visible was K-pop stans took over hashtags like White Lives Matter or White Out Wednesday or Blue Lives Matter on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah. And essentially flooded them with memes and fan cams and stuff like that too. So that was super visible. And one of the things, so I did some kind of follow-up reporting, like more comprehensive stuff after a lot of this happened. And that in particular was kind of contentious because though like spamming these hashtags with fan cams did make them completely unusable for racists who were trying to use them, genuinely, they also made them trend. So White Lives Matter was like trending at number 2 on Twitter. And in speaking to like some Black fans about that, that's upsetting to some people. Not all, but some did find that like not great to see because, you know, even if you see it trending under K-pop, like that's still a hashtag like that trending super high. Yeah. But yeah. Yeah. And then there was the whole, I think it's, you know, it's really interesting because like you touched on this a little bit, is that I've seen a lot of reporting on
K-pop fans like claiming that they did this, but it seems like because it is so like on this like larger group level, it's been really hard to sort of tie any specific instance to a specific group. And that sort of makes me think like, okay, how does this fandom work? Like they see this and then are there like a couple key Twitters that then like tweet this out? Like how do they mobilize?
Yeah, really interesting things about like K-pop fandom, and like I would say because I don't want to like totally generalize, like Anglophone like K-pop fandom as well, where like it's just built into the way that the fandom works. So K-pop fans, and I want to put in a caveat too that like K-pop fandom is far from like a unified group or any kind of like homogenous like monolith. It's really, first of all, it's fragmented based on like specific groups. So the BTS fandom is very different from the SHINee fandom or the Luna fandom. And so it's broken into these factions too, but I think too a lot of recent discourse has also flattened it to be like imagining as if, okay, all of K-pop fandom is engaging in these kinds of like quote unquote anti-racist or trolling acts when it's a really diverse group based on age, race, ethnicity, location, things like that. And so like there's far from like a unified sense. But going back to like the mobilization strategies, K-pop fans are so used to trending hashtags and mobilizing around certain hashtags, coming together for like voting campaigns. So voting for music shows in Korea is a really big thing for K-pop fans who try to get idol groups like first wins on South Korean music shows. And so voting in that way is already like built into the fandom. So essentially mass mobilization on this scale is already part of the fabric of the way the fandom works anyways. And so when certain ideas start to like be posed, even if it's not by a super large account, they will spread really quickly and people can easily jump on them. And so I think a lot of that is just like muscle memory, because in some cases you do have like, there was one instance early on, I think it was on May 29th, where Lady Gaga and Blackpink released a single called Sour Candy.
Oh, wait. And Blackpink's a K-pop band, by the way. Yeah,
right. Yeah, Blackpink is a 4-member girl group. They actually just released a single today. That's pretty fun. But they had a single off of Chromatica, Lady Gaga's most recent album. And normally when K-pop artists release songs, their fan bases work to like trend hashtags, bring more attention to it. And originally, there was a hashtag event planned for Sour Candy, but it was about 4 days after the death of George Floyd. And so a lot of the Blackpink fan bases came together to encourage people to not trend the Sour Candy hashtag. And essentially it did trend at one point, but essentially try to stop it from trending and instead focus efforts on working to trend the Black Lives Matter hashtag. And so like in that sense, that was something where some of these fan bases with hundreds of thousands of followers did kind of do a top down, like we should really collectively try to do this. But a lot of the time it just comes from like certain people and then it grows in momentum in the fandom as well.
Okay. So then is this fandom? So I'm like watching Cat and there's a lot of people who are like, wow, like I haven't heard of this before. This is new to me. So like give us a little background on like what these communities look like, because I think what your reporting is really good at doing is like not generalizing the community. Like, because I think some people have an idea that K-pop stans are like just young women. Is that true? No,
not at all. Thank you. Also, I appreciate that. That's something that I really try to do. So no, I think there's a perception, especially recently with all of these viral events in mainstream media, that K-pop fans are like a group of like screaming teenage white girls in the United States, which is very far from the truth. And so there's lots of K-pop. Obviously, there are, a lot of like teenage girls who are really into K-pop, but the fandom is so much more diverse than that. There are a ton of Black fans into K-pop, especially like that was something that I was trying to report on recently, especially given the quote-unquote anti-racist label that the K-pop fandom has earned recently, which isn't necessarily true, because there's a ton of racism that's still, and anti-blackness in particular, that's still really pervasive in K-pop fandom. But no, I mean, fandoms are super, super diverse just on all demographics. So there's K-pop fans in probably every single country on Earth, or nearly, and they range widely in age as well. Some of the I spoke to an organizer for a BTS fan collective called One in an Army that runs like charity campaigns on a monthly basis in a really organized way. It's super, super neat. But she is 40 years old, and that's not something that's abnormal whatsoever in K-pop fandom. There are people of all ages, genders, sexual identities. There's whole, you know, I think there's a certain like idea that they're all like teenage girls lusting after K-pop boys, but like there's a whole, I don't want to say meme, but like, you know, trope of like a lesbian and her K-pop boy. And so like in many ways, these kinds of fandoms like diverge from really heteronormative or like racial assumptions we would have as well.
Yeah. Well, and so, and it makes sense, right? Because like K-pop is such a ginormous industry at this point. Like there are so many fans, it sells, like the tours are worldwide. Like how could it be such a specific group? So question from, let's see here, gonna take a couple audience questions here. I saw one from, I think it was, then Tom was like, do you have like any recommendations for someone who is getting into K-pop? Is there like a gateway K-pop band or song or album?
Oh man. I think especially if you are like living in the United States, I think BTS is, I mean, you know, just because they're so ingrained in the pop culture here too, is a really easy group to get into now, especially because they have such a wide discography that appeals to a variety of different music tastes. BTS was actually like my first K-pop group, technically back in early 2017. It's been 3 years, which kind of makes me feel old in the fandom, because so many people have come on recently. But I think like that's a group that you're going to be able to like really easily find a lot of like reading material on, especially in English. But I'm trying to think, there's no like good like gateway group. It all depends on your music taste. And so like if you're into like really, really poppy things, there's some girl groups that do really cool and fun like bubblegum pop sort of things. I would maybe recommend like, I've been really into this group called Oh My Girl recently. I feel like I really slept on them for a long time. But other really popular groups, like if you're into hip hop and like pop with trap influences, Blackpink is great. And they're also like super popular in the United States as well. They performed at Coachella last year. But yeah, if you like say what kind of music you like, I could give a more specific recommendation.
Yeah, I'm watching the chat, so if anyone like wants any tailored K-pop recommendations from like the source of K-pop themselves, like let us know. So in the chat, Donnie Danico says, what's your thought on how the media has reported on K-pop fans getting involved in recent events? It seems like in a few minutes you've given more than all the reporting I've seen. LOL.
That's very kind. Thank you. I think there's been a lot of really, really, really great reporting. But there's also, I think, by like outlets that haven't been covering it as much, or like more mainstream or like cable news outlets, there have been some missteps. And what I said before too, I think like something that's happened along the way in all of this attention is that people who aren't familiar with K-pop fandom have started to think of it as like this monolith of these people who are all like really passionate. They're young and they're passionate about social justice, and they're trolls. And like, that's true in a lot of cases. And K-pop fandom does have a lot of like power in online spaces. But I think what's gotten left out is the fact that racism and anti-Blackness are still very much pervasive within the fandom. And a lot of like Black fans, and stan communities in general really drive the culture. People like to talk about like stan language and stuff. That's like comes from Black communities. That's AAVE. And a lot of those like things that come up that are attributed to stan culture, like, I don't know, that's on period, things like that, or that kind of slang like that comes from Black communities. And at the same time, like, Black fans are consistently harassed and at times doxxed in K-pop fandom. And a lot of that way that manifests, and one of the K-pop experts, Michelle Cho, who is at the University of Toronto that I talked to for one of my pieces, and I, had seen this happen in real time, is that like a Black fan will raise an issue about cultural appropriation, or sometimes there have been instances where idols have been like, oh, I'm really good at like talking Black, and so like a lot of these like racist incidents that happen in like with K-pop idols, sometimes like Black fans will be like, hey, like this is problematic, or like this isn't good, and other fans will take that as like a personal attack on their idol, and in turn will like harass Black fans for raising issues like that. And so I think like a lot of the things like that, as well as the fact that like the hashtag thing is a great example where, and I don't want to make a generalization, especially like as a white person, this didn't bother some Black people. But like some of the sources that I talked to, spoke about how like seeing White Lives Matter was not, even though it was trending like under K-pop, like that wasn't
what
great
they wanted to
see or feel. And like things like that. And so like I think that's the biggest thing that's gotten left out of this conversation, is the fact that like these fandoms are being heralded as anti-racist when there's a lot of racism to contend with within the fandom itself. And so I think that's the biggest generalization. But there's like, that's not to say though, there's been some really, really great reporting that like I had linked some of them. Abby Olheiser at the MIT Tech Review has been doing really great work. Caitlin Tiffany wrote a really great piece at The Atlantic about it. One author, Natasha Malenga, wrote an op-ed in Teen Vogue about why K-pop stars need to keep speaking up about Black Lives Matter, because so much of K-pop is owed to Black music and Black culture. So there has been like a lot of really good writing around it too, but I think like in a lot of the mainstream things, that's what's gotten left out.
Well, and this is like a very fraught question, but Pop Clop and Drop It asks, does rap co-opt or appropriate Black culture? And I think that it's important before we go on to acknowledge that like we aren't the authorities on this, and this isn't necessarily like our critique to laud, but that like in our effort to be allies in this moment, like we can think critically about this based on what we've read, right? Does rap in K-pop co-opt or appropriate Black culture? I think it's hard, right, to answer that in a clear-cut way. But I mean, you just spoke to this, right? K-pop very clearly draws influence from Black culture, whether it's hip-hop, dance forms, or style even, and makes a lot of money off of that, right? And so, like, do you have like anything to sort of add to that conversation? And you already kind of talked a lot about this, and I think that, it's certainly like tied to what you were talking about earlier just now.
Yeah. And I do want to like once again give a caveat that like I'm not a music critic. And I don't have a ton of knowledge on this, and also like I am white, but like as a manner of critique, I'm actually going to go back to Natasha Malenga's op-ed in Teen Vogue that I mentioned earlier. And
we can include that in the show notes too, if folks are interested.
Yeah, I can send some links and stuff like that. But like, so Taiji, who is generally credited as like one of the many founders of modern K-pop. She writes, integrated Black American dance-oriented R&B and hip-hop into his music videos. As Vulture notes, So Taiji himself inherited the style from acts like Korea's first hip-hop star, Hyunjin Young and Wawa. In the early 90s, up-and-coming Korean hip-hop stars danced to New Jack Swing. And so rap is a huge part of K-pop, and like every group will have at least one rapper. I would probably say, but not all of them, for example, write their own verses. And I had seen a tweet where, I wish I could find it now, but, you know, someone was like, every cadence, you know, every rhythm, all these different like verse structures that your faves have put out, like Black rappers did it first, right? And so like, I think that rap and K-pop owes an immeasurable amount to like the rap styles and things that originated in Black communities. Yeah. And so like, there's absolutely no way to divorce like the musical influences of K-pop from Black culture. Even modern day. I mean, like so much of it. You look at like BTS's early discography, and there's certain things that I think in one song, one of the rappers says like "West Side till I die," and like later he was like, you know, I shouldn't have said that, you know, and so like. There's a lot of those cues where some of these artists that like grew up listening to rap music and stuff like that, like incorporate. And so, yeah, I think once again, I'm not like an authority on this, but I would say that, K-pop music owes so much to Black culture. Yeah.
Staple Pie asks, so are the K-pop artists speaking out, or all these online protests just driven by the fans?
Both, sort of. So some K-pop artists did speak out. Some of them it took a little longer than others. I think some of the earlier artists that did speak out were like CL, who is a female artist and was previously a member of the girl group 21. As well as I didn't confirm this, but I saw reports of a member of a rookie group, Secret Number, Denise, who spoke out about it on Instagram, and later her account like disappeared. And so there are certain companies that have spoken it out as well, but like other artists, BTS, I think spoke out or tweeted about Black Lives Matter on June 6th, I believe.
Yeah, and they donated, right?
They did. So They spoke. I think they tweeted on like June 4th or something. But they donated $1 million to Black Lives Matter, and I think Variety broke that news on like June 6th. And so like certain groups have like donated or made contributions. Companies like SM Entertainment, which is one of the big three. Well, I guess I don't know. Yeah, one of the big South Korean entertainment companies recently put out a statement that I saw people kind of taking issue with, because they said like, we are new to this conversation, but we want to support, you know, Black SM collaborators and fans and stuff like that. But like people were like, you're not new to this conversation. You've, you know, built your business off of Black culture. You know, regularly collaborate with Black producers. And that was after actually some fans that I spoke to had organized a push. That was like a hashtag campaign, SM Blackout, asking SM to speak out about and like speak in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, because they hadn't yet, and they do owe just so much to Black culture. And so a lot of artists have spoken out, but they're not the ones who are like pushing fans to do these sorts of things. So all of these like trolling things, whether it's reserving tickets to Trump's rallies or trolling hashtags and things like that, like that's coming from within the fandom. And I think that's one of the misconceptions today, is that artists play a role in that explicitly. Like recently, a group, Tomorrow by Together, appeared on, I think it's Good Morning New York, and ahead of their performance at KCON, or K-Contact, which was a virtual festival that happened this week. And the news anchor like asked them about ticket reservations for Trump's rally, and they were like, we've been preparing for our performance, you know, and a lot of fans found that question inappropriate because like the idols aren't necessarily involved in that sort of thing. But I do want to say, like, one of the things that happened, so BTS donated $1 million to Black Lives Matter, and the news about that came out. And then that night, ARMY, BTS's fandom, was like, what if we matched that? And then in just over 24 hours, they actually did.
Yeah.
And they raised over $1 million benefiting organizations like the NAACP, Reclaim the Block, the National Bailout, and stuff like that. And so like in that way, one of the organizers that I spoke to, you know, she works for, but she works with One in an Army, the fan collective that I mentioned earlier. And they already had like a donation card website set up and a split donation feature where they could track. And they had about like, I think $50,000 donated, which was already a lot for that they had observed on the scale of their previous campaigns. But then they, you know, she said something like Army was already doing a lot of this, but once BTS stepped up, that really just like, threw gas on the fire. And so like idols doing things like that can make a difference within the fandom, but a lot of those fandom efforts like don't come from idols, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm reading a bit of the chat here, and Kwamel said, secret numbers Denise did post about BLM on her Insta story, but the account was deleted soon after by her company, presumably. Right. And so following up to that, then Tom was like, and I'll get it right this time, you actually asked this question, asks her company, do record deals work differently for K-pop? Can you sort of expand on how K-pop idols and essentially raising K-pop idols in that industry works a little differently from how we know like our pop stars here in the US?
Yeah. So once again, I'm not like a total expert on it or the business of it, but broadly the idol system does work differently from the ways we see celebrities I don't know, have a rise to fame in the United States. So generally what happens is that people become like trainees at a company. They audition to become trainees at a certain company, and then they will hopefully train for a while in becoming an idol, whether that's singing, dancing, rapping, public speaking, things like that. And will hopefully be selected to debut as part of a group or as a solo artist or something like that. And so like, it starts where you sign with a company as a trainee, and then hopefully you debut as an idol. And for many, that doesn't happen. But for some, it does. And so once you do that, you know, you're under contract with a certain company. And I don't know like a ton about how those business deals work. Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of them are kept hidden, you know, intentionally, like a lot of the big corporate, sort of. And
right. I think there's like a perception too that like a lot of people talk about like the dark side of K-pop, which I think is rooted in a lot of like racist and xenophobic beliefs when Western media like only covers you know, what they perceive to be the quote unquote dark side. But there is still like, there have been examples of like exploitation of idols by companies. But yeah, so like idol groups or soloists do like exist under certain companies, and the promotion cycle is like a bit different too. So like, I don't know, groups have, you call them like comebacks very specifically, and like the promotion cycle is pretty like laid out where you'll come out with a single or single album or an EP or a full album, and we'll promote the title track on South Korean music shows, and you'll usually do a bunch of like variety appearances. Now when groups release music, that will sometimes include, you know, doing appearances with Western publications and things like that. But yeah, so like basically you sign as a trainee and then hopefully will like debut.
Yeah. Something that's really struck me about K-pop is like how much of a science they seem to have marketing down to. Like they have these it's like almost with the seasons. Like they have comeback and then it's quiet for a while, and then maybe we get a tease, maybe we get a book or a music video. And then we start seeing a bunch of appearances that sort of play up their charm, and then like, boom, album. Like, it's honestly like incredible to me. I don't like, it is part of like, it feels like a machine sometimes, right? But like, they just really have their formula down. And so, here's a great question. J. Walter Weatherman asks, can you talk a little bit about how military conscription affects the industry and the fandom.
Yeah.
And again, it's like from your, it's so hard because, right, so many of like the nuances and like the actual stories are sort of, barred behind NDAs and like intentionally sort of kept quiet. But like, are there some aspects to that you could talk to?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to like the fandom aspect. And like, once again, obviously, like as a caveat, I am not Korean. I'm not from South Korea, and I don't have a super in-depth knowledge of like military conscription culture. But the way that it affects the fandom is, it's in many ways kind of a sore spot. So like, for fans of boy groups. And so like, obviously at a certain point, the men in these boy bands do have to like serve some time of mandatory military service in South Korea. And certain groups like deal with that in different ways. So for example, like one group, EXO, currently has several members serving in the military, and they're, they sometimes they do like partial comebacks without certain members or like things like that, or they'll form subunits.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that I think is cool is SM Entertainment has this hybrid boy group called Super M, which is comprised of members of several other different boy groups that are under the label. So like that's EXO, SHINee, Wavy, and NCT, and they created a 7-member group that could also promote even while maybe certain members of those other groups were doing their military service. And so like for fans, a lot of them don't like that to be brought up because it's like, one of your favorite idols is going to be leaving for several years and will be promoting with the group and things like that. So it's something that like, I don't know, fans don't like to necessarily talk about because sometimes, people will be like, oh, well, this could be our last comeback for a while, or our last like, OT7 that standing in for like, it's based off of like OTP, but then like the full group,
Yeah.
If they have 7 members, like this will be our last like OT7 comeback for however many years, because that's the other thing is like K-pop groups do vary in age.
Yeah.
As an example, like the members of BTS were born between the years of 1992 and 1997, and so like there is a wider age range in that respect, but yeah, so I think like idols will just take hiatuses from certain groups, and at times like that can mean that the group won't promote in full for several years, as the younger members also enlist as well. And so
yeah.
Okay, so I've been reading through some comments here, and we talked about this. Pop Clop and Drop It said, I also want to hear more about the commercial aspect of K-pop and how it maybe takes advantage of the fandom to turn young idols into money machines. It sounds a little aggressive. Maybe it's true to an extent. But I thought what you were saying is interesting is like how there is this tendency in Western media to only cover that side of that or focus on that side of that. When in reality, right, like we have Disney Channel. We have like, look at what happened with like Miley Cyrus or Demi Lovato or all these folks who kind of went through similar machines, right? But like we don't see as many retrospectives on those industries.
Yeah, and I think like some of the writing that I've read about this to try and like educate myself on how people feel, like some of the ways we characterize it, even like calling it, I don't know, like even saying like it's a machine, or like, they're all like, people will be like, oh, K-pop idols remind me of like robots. A lot of that is like rooted in racism and xenophobia and characterizations of like Asian and South Korean people, and so like I think in Western media there is that tendency to like fixate on like, oh, like this dark industry is exploiting young people, and like that does happen, but that does happen in America as well. You know, I think we like to like define ourselves in opposition and pretend that's not something that happens in entertainment industries around the world. But yeah, I mean, companies can stand to make a lot of money off of K-pop idols. Like it depends, but yeah.
So here's a great question from Bob Backwards. Maybe this is a weird question, but I'm just learning about all this. It sounds like most of these huge K-pop groups are backed by big companies or labels. Can you be an indie or underground K-pop group? And I'd like to sort of add another question on that. Do we have like indie or underground K-pop groups that are like
made in the US? Is that even possible? Like,
there are debates over like, oh God, what was the boy group? I think they were in the US. I don't remember what they were called, but they're most recently.
We'll include in the show notes. Whatever doesn't get in gets thrown in the show notes.
But people have tried to create like the first American K-pop group or the first British K-pop group. There was one group that released some music recently called Kachi that was based out of the UK, and a lot of people were really irritated because, like, you know, even if you're singing in Korean, like, that's, I don't know. There's a lot of like debate over it, and also I think a conversation there about like white people. Not all the members of Kachi were white, by the way, but like white people and other in like Western nations trying to make a space for themselves in the K-pop industry, whereas like there's very rarely been a space for like Korean Americans or Asian Americans in like American music. So yeah, that does happen, but like people are not into it. In terms of like indie like K-pop groups, this is where like I guess some of my knowledge would blur, but like there are smaller groups and smaller idols that maybe would fit into like our conception of like what we think of as indie, but like there are like, I think the other thing is like there are like indie Korean artists and R&B artists and rappers that aren't idols, and so like not all South Korean music is K-pop. You know? It's
right. It's so obvious when you say it, but then like what gets defined, it's like gets kind of messy.
Yeah, I think that's the other consideration too, is like, you know, when people in America are looking in, they're like, oh, like this is South Korean music, and that's not true.
Yeah.
You know? K-pop and like idol music is its own subset. There's a whole breadth of like indie Korean artists and stuff like that. One thing I will maybe say that like kind of fits into this is that there are smaller companies, as opposed to like the really big like companies. Like the big three were considered previously to be SM Entertainment, YG Entertainment, and JYP Entertainment. And now that's being shaken up a little bit, in particular by BTS's company Big Hit, which has become wildly successful over the past couple years. And it's starting to like acquire other labels, but there are like smaller labels, and Big Hit did start as that. BTS, you know, came from a smaller company when they debuted in 2013. And so like, it's not all these massive entertainment companies. Some of them are a lot smaller than others. And so like there are levels in that as well.
Yeah. Would you say that who is the largest K-pop group right now? I'm sure there's like a lot of ways that you could measure that, but like, would that be BTS? Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, one of the things I don't think, and this was a really big debate that kind of came in a lot into focus probably in like late 2017 when BTS was getting popular in the United States. But BTS is the most popular group globally. I would feel pretty confident saying. And they've really like, I don't know, I guess made the biggest impact globally, but I don't think we should be necessarily like judging K-pop groups by who has the most success in the United States. And so like other groups like, I think of like EXO, which is a huge boy group in Korea, or SHINee, which is another boy band that was really like at its heyday, and like was actively promoting a lot in like the mid 2010s. Other older groups like Super Junior were critical, and those were only boy groups, right? When we talk about girl groups, we talk about like Girls' Generation, which was one of the like super popular. 21, we talk about like Blackpink 2, and even today, like Luna, which has a huge international fandom. But hasn't always had the same sort of success in Korea. But like since, even before they debuted, you know, even back when I started following them in 2017, like huge international fandom, huge online fandom. Palmer, you're a star. Let's end on something that's like not putting you on the spot. I'm just like so impressed. Every time I ask something, I'm like, wait, that's like a really specific question that like I would have to prepare talking points for. So how was it to go to the BTS concert in Chicago last
summer. Some context. Both Palmer and I attended this concert. We did not know each other. I think we like followed each other on Twitter or whatever. And so like I remember showing my friend who took me like, oh wow, this like person I follow on Twitter is here too. That's kind of funny. Like what was that? What was that experience like? Or what was the experience of like your first K-pop concert like?
Oh my God. I want to say too, I think it's so funny that there's so many ways we could have met before we actually did.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Like,
yeah.
Lived in Minneapolis.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Also, wait. Again, in addition to the SpongeBob acknowledgement, there's another important acknowledgement notification that we need to make, and it is that Palmer, you went to
University of Minnesota.
Hell yes.
In 2019. So
yeah.
I spent a lot of time there also.
Yeah. So Palmer's from Minnesota. And so I feel like on MinnMax, it's like a legal requirement to acknowledge every single time someone is from Minnesota or has like any tie to Minnesota.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, I feel like it's hilarious that we live so close to each other for so long. It's just never. But K-pop.
Yeah. Well, K-pop concert.
Concerts. My first BTS concert was actually in, I think, March 2017. And it was actually very shortly after I had started really getting into them. I listened to their music for like 2 months. And then I got I started watching like the YouTube videos, and then you just spiral, right?
Yeah.
And it was actually very like quick turnaround where it was like a Friday. And I showed my roommate like 2 music videos of theirs. And then I was like, yeah, they're having a concert in Chicago like next Wednesday, but there's no way to go. I think it'd be dope though.
Yeah.
And then like 30 minutes later, we're studying in our room and she goes like, hey, what if we drove there? And so we were sophomores in college at the time. And I had a midterm that Wednesday afternoon and we drove 6 hours to Chicago. We went to the concert and then we drove the 6 hours back that night, but it was so worth it. And it was the first, like, I felt so out of the loop because I barely knew all the members' names.
Yeah.
They played songs that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And, like, but it's euphoric. It's so fun.
Yeah. No, it's so funny that you say that because I had a really similar experience, like a little more thrown into the deep water, where my roommate and like one of my closest friends was like, hey, so my family's from Chicago. And she's like, if we drove there and like I bought you a ticket and we stayed with your parents, would you go? And I'm like, heck yes. Like that sounds fun. I'd love to experience this. I have no idea. I've never listened to any K-pop before, but like it just sounded like so fun. And so like we spent the road trip, like she was like quizzing me like, okay, who's this? To be honest, like I'm still not great at it. But like it felt like I described it to my dad. I was like, it's like if Disney put on like a world concert tour, but like Disney was like teaming up with NSYNC. Like
yeah. The production value is just so cool. And I think like, I don't know, the atmosphere at BTS concerts is so fun because like or at any concert, you know, there's certain things, there's like a connection between the idols and the fans and like that's where it's the most realized, I guess. And so it feels like just so like the emotions you feel, like I don't do the like screaming thing a lot, but I lose my voice every time. Yeah. You know, it's just like fun as you can go. But
no, I mean, like if there's anyone watching, if you ever get the opportunity to go, I think BTS was supposed to come to Minnesota, but then maybe COVID, they were going to come for the Jingle Ball, right? Or something like that.
Oh, I don't remember. I know Monsta X performed at the Jingle Ball like 2 years ago in Minnesota, but I think I forget where they're supposed to like all their tour stops. Yeah, but they're expanding a lot. K-pop groups have come to Minnesota though before. I saw a group called Card in like downtown Minneapolis once. But.
That's sick. I love it. Okay, well, we're just tying up here. Is there like anything else that like you're dying to share with everyone here that you think that we've missed, you know, because like you're the expert, and so I'm just here asking the questions.
Expert in training. I have a lot to learn, but thank you. No, I think I would be remiss to not say Stan Luna as a Luna stan. And also because of the meme. But I mean, I think like the other thing I'd say is that there's a lot of conceptions about like what K-pop is, and people think they're predisposed to just not be into it. But I do like sincerely think there's a K-pop song out there for everyone, because it combines so many different musical influences and genres. And so like dive into it if you're curious. And it's just so fun. Like the music is so good. The production is so amazing. So
well, and on that note, I do have like one more question. We sort of touched on this, but like for our gaming adjacent, anime adjacent fans, like do you see some overlap with K-pop in that and like some mingling there?
Yeah, definitely. I think like there definitely is like a cultural overlap in that respect. There are certain things like, well, a lot of idols are like really into like PUBG or like MapleStory.
Really? PUBG? Wait, okay, I'm sorry, stop. Can you go a little more into that? That just seems, I don't know why, like that connection doesn't seem like the most obvious to me.
No, I don't know. I mean, I think like any games that are like really big in South Korea, like you can probably assume that they'll also be popular among idols. I can't off the top of my head think of any idols that are into PUBG, but I know it happens. Or like there are definitely memes. Like there was one like meme where a Luna fan like pretended that like it was something where like one of the members is now like the richest female esports athlete in the world after winning the Fortnite World Cup. And like, it was a joke, but like, I think Slasher like retweeted it and was like, what, you know? And so like, there is overlap there and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you so much. If MinnMax ever gets together a PUBG K-pop community, we'll let you know.
Let me know.
Is there anything that you'd like to plug before we go?
Yeah, if you want to ever read my work, I publish on insider.com. It's a website.
It's a website, sure is.
It's a website.
It exists.
It exists. Otherwise, you can find me on Twitter at Haasch, Haasch Palmer. I think it's on the screen, or _ Palmer. And I also have a podcast about High School Musical, the musical, the series.
I can't.
Anyone's into that sort of thing.
It's such a mouthful, and I love it so much. Wait, can you say the acronym, like by memory? It's HS.
Yeah, it's HSMTMTS.
Okay. Wow.
That's the acronym. The podcast is called High School Musical, the musical, the series, the podcast. But no, that's it. But yeah, if you want to read anything else that I've written about K-pop or fandom or anything, you can find me on Insider. Yeah,
well, one, highly recommend. And if y'all are looking for some like more gaming related reads, like Palmer also does games reporting. Like you're an incredibly talented person who's just like all over the place. I saw you publish on the Dr. Disrespect thing today. So definitely go follow Palmer on Twitter, and thanks so much for coming through and joining us for this first ever episode of Refreshed. If folks have any feedback, thoughts, always feel free to drop them in the MinnMax community. I'm also always interested in hearing what folks are interested in learning more about. So feel free to reach out about that as well. Thank you so much, and have a awesome weekend. Bye.
Bye.
MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. The Deepest Dive is the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet. Prove us wrong, please. The MinnMax Show podcast airs every Thursday. Patreon supporters vote on what we stream every single week, and a whole lot more. Give us a shot, try subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we hope we can win you over.